The cell was cold. The walls were made of black stone glowing with strange alien symbols. In the silence, she could hear her own heartbeat. It was slow, heavy, like a drum calling her to the end. She sat on the ground, her arms bound in chains that burned her skin. She had been captured for weeks, maybe months. She had lost count of time. Food was scarce and water tasted like poison. Still, she had survived. But tonight, survival had no meaning. Tonight, she was ready to die. The guards outside whispered in their harsh, alien tongue. Their words were cruel, sharp like blades. She did not need to understand. She already knew what they said. Execution. End. Silence. Her people were gone. Her world had burned. She had nothing left, no hope, no future. Death was not her enemy anymore. It was her release. She closed her eyes and waited for the sound of the door. And then, it came. A metallic clang echoed down the long hallway. The heavy doors opened with a hiss. She lifted her head, expecting the alien commander to step inside. She braced herself, telling her heart to be still. This was the end. But it was not the commander. A shadow walked into the light, a figure she did not expect. The steps were slow, steady, almost human. Her eyes narrowed in confusion. No, impossible. It was a man, a human man. The guards behind him laughed. They called him small, weak, foolish. One human against the Empire. What madness was this? But the man did not bow. He did not tremble. His eyes, dark and unbroken, looked at her as if he had already chosen her fate. She felt her breath catch. Who was he? Why had he come here? The commander finally entered, towering in black armor, eyes glowing like fire. He raised his weapon. The guards raised theirs too. The prisoner braced once more for death. She closed her eyes, but before the strike could fall, the human spoke. His voice was calm, steady, almost fearless. You will not touch her. The hall went silent. The aliens stared in shock, then burst into cruel laughter. A human giving orders? Impossible. The commander sneered. One life against an empire? You have no power here. But the human did not look away. He took one step forward, then another. His voice cut through the darkness. Power, he said, is not what you think it is. The prisoner's chains burned hotter as if they feared the man's words. For the first time in many years, a flicker of something stirred inside her chest. A small light. Hope. The guards aimed their weapons. The air grew tense. One wrong move and the human would be burned to ash. But he did not care. His calm smile never broke. His eyes never left hers. She wanted to shout at him, to tell him to leave, to save himself. But her voice was gone, buried under months of silence and pain. The commander laughed again. Then show us your power, human. The human only nodded. I already have. And then it happened. The walls shook. The ceiling trembled. The entire prison quaked as alarms screamed through the halls. Lights turned red. The guards turned in confusion. Somewhere far above, explosions thundered. The human's smile widened. You thought I came here alone, he said. You thought wrong. The prisoner's eyes widened in shock. The alien guards froze in disbelief. Outside the cell, chaos grew. Louder. Shouting. Fire. The sound of ships breaking through the sky. The commander roared in rage, swinging his blade toward the human. The guards fired their weapons. The prisoner screamed without sound, but the human did not move. Instead, he raised his hand, and in that single motion, the cell doors burst open. The smoke filled the corridor as the alarm screamed. Red lights blinked across the ceiling, turning the prison into a chamber of fire and shadows. The alien commander roared in anger, but the human did not flinch. He stood calm, his eyes steady, his breath even, as if this chaos was part of his plan. The prisoner could not believe what she saw. A single man, fragile in body, yet strong in spirit, had walked into the Empire's darkest prison. And now, the Empire shook because of him. The commander raised his blade, sparks dancing on its edge. "Kill him," he ordered. The guards moved at once. Their weapons burned with light, ready to strike the human down. But before they could fire, the floor shuddered. A massive blast shook the walls. Dust and broken stone rained from above. Somewhere in the distance, ships howled, their engines cutting through the night. The human's lips curved into the faintest smile. "I told you," he said softly. "I am not alone." The commander's eyes burned with fury. "Who are you?" he demanded. The human stepped forward. Each stride was slow, but powerful. He was not a soldier in shining armor. He carried no heavy weapons, no shields. Yet there was something inside him, an unseen strength that made even the armed guards hesitate. He stopped in front of the prisoner. For the first time, she saw his face clearly. His skin was scarred, his jaw firm, his eyes burning with something she had not seen in years. Conviction. "You are not dying here," he told her. His voice was not a request. It was a promise. The prisoner's heart beat faster. No one had ever spoken to her like that since her capture. She wanted to believe him, but fear clung to her like chains. She whispered weakly, "They will kill us both." The human's gaze hardened. "Not tonight." With a sudden motion, he grabbed the chains that bound her. Sparks flew. A strange device hidden in his sleeve lit up, releasing a flash of blue fire. The chains hissed, cracked, and shattered into pieces. The prisoner gasped. She was free. After so long, she was truly free. The guards roared in anger and rushed forward. The commander himself lunged, his blade aimed at the human's chest. But the man was faster than they expected. He ducked, rolled, and grabbed a fallen guard's weapon in one swift move. Energy flared as he fired. A blinding light shot across the corridor. One guard fell, then another. The human moved like lightning, not with the strength of an army, but with the precision of a man who had faced death many times and never surrendered. The prisoner staggered to her feet, her body weak, but her eyes wide with shock. This man, this human, was defying an empire by himself. The commander growled in rage. "You think one human can fight the empire? You are nothing." The human glanced at him, his weapon steady. "One human," he said, "is sometimes enough." The commander charged again, but before their weapons clashed, another explosion shook the prison. The walls cracked. Flames burst from the ceilings. The sounds of battle grew louder outside. The prisoner realized something. This was not just a rescue. This was war. The human grabbed her hand. His grip was firm, unshaken. "We move," he said. She stumbled beside him as they ran through the smoke-filled corridors. Guards shouted, sirens screamed, and the walls shook with every blast. Yet the human never slowed. He moved as if he knew every turn, every hallway, every weak point in this fortress. At one point, a blast door slammed shut in front of them. The prisoner felt despair return, but the human knelt, pulled another strange device from his belt and pressed it to the door. Sparks flew, lights flickered, and in seconds the door hissed open. "Impossible," she whispered. "Nothing is impossible," he replied. They ran again. The prisoner's legs trembled, but the human pulled her forward. For the first time since her capture, she felt something rising inside her. It was not fear, it was not despair, it was hope. Behind them, the commander's roar echoed like thunder. "You cannot escape. The stars belong to us." The human stopped only for a second. He turned, his voice sharp as steel. "Not anymore." Then he pulled her forward again. The hall opened into a vast hangar. Through the smoke, she saw ships, sleek, black, waiting to launch. Soldiers poured in from every corner, weapons raised. The prisoner froze. There were too many. They could not fight them all. But the human did not stop. He lifted the stolen weapon, eyes blazing. "Stay behind me," he said. She obeyed, though every instinct screamed at her to run. She watched as one man, just one, human, stood tall against an army, and in that moment she understood. He was not just fighting for her. He was fighting for something greater, for freedom, for a choice that could shatter the stars. The battle for their escape had just begun. The hangar was a storm of chaos. Sirens screamed, lights flashed red, and soldiers rushed in from every door. The air was filled with the sound of engines warming up, and the heavy boots of an alien army preparing to crush them. The human stood. In the center, his weapon raised, the freed prisoner close behind him. He was surrounded. 100 soldiers, maybe more, their glowing eyes fixed on him, their weapons ready to fire. The commander's voice echoed through the hangar. "You are cornered, human. There is no escape. Lay down your weapon, and I may spare you a quicker death." The prisoner's heart sank. She had believed in him, but this was too much. Even he could not fight an empire's army. She whispered, almost in despair, "It's over." But the human did not agree. He turned his head slightly toward her, his calm voice cutting through the noise. "It's only over when we stop fighting." And then he moved. The first shot rang out like thunder. A bolt of blue light struck the nearest soldier, sending him crashing to the ground. The hangar exploded with action. Weapons fired, lasers flew, and the air burned with heat. The human moved, like no one she had ever seen. He was not stronger than them, not faster by nature, but his movements were sharp, precise, and fearless. He ducked under blasts, rolled across the floor, and struck with deadly aim. Every shot he fired found its mark. Still, there were too many. The prisoner watched in terror as the soldiers closed in. She looked for a weapon, any weapon, but she was weak, her hands trembling. For so long she had been chained, helpless. Now she was free, yet powerless. Her eyes fell on a fallen guard's blade. She reached for it. The weight was heavy, almost too heavy, but she tightened her grip. For the first time in years, she felt fire rise inside her chest. A soldier rushed at the human from behind. She cried out, lifting the blade with all her strength. The strike was clumsy, but it was enough. The alien fell, stunned, giving the human a chance to fire again. He glanced at her, surprise in his eyes. She was no longer waiting for death. She was fighting. The commander roared, "Pathetic! You think you can stand against us with scraps of courage?" He raised his arm and the massive hangar doors began to close. Their escape route was vanishing. The prisoner's hope flickered again. If the doors sealed, they were finished. But the human was already running. He pulled her with him, weaving through blasts of fire and sparks of metal. "We need to move," he shouted. They sprinted toward a ship at the far end of the hangar. It was small, sleek, and unguarded. For now. Soldiers turned, firing wildly, trying to cut them down. The prisoner stumbled, her legs weak from months, in chains. A blast struck the ground beside her, sending her crashing down. The human spun back instantly, lifting her onto her feet. "Don't stop," he said firmly. "Not now." His grip burned with strength, dragging her forward as the army closed in. Shots grazed his arm, slicing his jacket, but he did not slow. His focus never wavered. The commander shouted again, "Bring them down, no human leaves this place alive." The soldiers obeyed, unleashing a storm of fire. The hangar glowed with deadly light. The prisoner thought it was the end, and then the human did something she did not expect. He reached into his belt and pulled out a small black device. Without hesitation, he threw it high into the air. The device flashed. For 1 second, the world was silent. Then the explosion came. A wave of fire and smoke burst across the hangar, knocking soldiers off their feet. The blast tore through weapons, engines, and steel. The very walls trembled under the force. The prisoner shielded her face, coughing in the smoke. When she looked again, the soldiers were scattered, stunned, and the path to the ship was open. The human pulled her forward once. "More! Go!" he shouted. They dashed through the chaos, stumbling up the ramp of the small ship. The controls lit up as the human slammed his hand on the panel. Engines roared to life. The ship shook, trembling with power. The commander, half burned, but still standing, raised his weapon and screamed in fury. "You cannot escape me, human." But the hangar doors were still closing. Smoke poured through the chamber. Alarms wailed louder than ever. The human fired the ship's thrusters. The vessel lifted, rising above the flames. The prisoner clung to her seat as the ground fell away. The ship spun, aiming for the shrinking gap in the doors. "Hold on," the human said calmly. The ship shot forward like a spear of fire. Sparks rained from the narrowing gap as the engine screamed. The walls rushed closer. For one moment, the prisoner thought they would crash, but they did not. With a roar, the ship blasted through the closing doors, tearing into open space. Stars filled the view, bright, endless, free. The prisoner gasped, staring at the stars she thought she would never see again. Her heart pounded, her breath shaking. She was alive. She was free. Beside her, the human's hands gripped the controls, steady as stone. His eyes never left the stars. For the first time, she whispered the question that burned in her mind. "Who are you?" The human's jaw tightened. His voice was low, filled with fire. "I am no one," he said. But tonight, no one was enough to defy an empire. The stars stretched before them like rivers of fire, endless and free. The prisoner sat in silence, staring out the ship's window. Her chest rose and fell with shaky breaths. She had thought she would die in chains, yet now she was racing through the galaxy beside a human who refused to bend. The hum of the ship's engines filled the cabin. Sparks still clung to its panels, burns from the prison's weapons. It was a miracle the small craft still flew. The human sat at the controls, his face calm, his hands steady. He flew as if he had done it 1,000 times before. She wanted to speak, to ask the questions burning in her heart. Who was he? Why had he risked everything to save her? But his eyes were fixed on the stars, his jaw hard, his silence deep. Finally, she whispered, "You could have left me to die." His gaze did not move. "I could have." "Then why didn't you?" She pressed. He turned his head, meeting her eyes. For a moment she saw something raw there, pain, memory, perhaps guilt. Then he looked back at the stars. "Because some things," he said softly, "are worth more than survival." Before she could answer, a sharp alarm cut through the cabin. The ship's console flashed red. The human's eyes narrowed. "They're tracking us." Her stomach dropped. "Already?" The human's fingers flew across the controls. "The Empire never lets prey escape. They'll hunt us to the edge of the stars." The prisoner clenched her fists. "Then we are doomed." "Not yet," the human replied. The ship banked sharply, diving into a belt of shattered asteroids. The rocks spun like giants in the void, colliding, splitting, burning in silence. The human weaved through them with impossible skill, guiding the ship between crushing walls of stone. Behind them, shadows appeared. Alien warships, sleek and black, streaked into the field, their weapons glowing. The hunt had begun. The prisoner clutched her seat. "We cannot outrun them." The human's lips pressed into a thin line. "We don't need to outrun them. We just need to outthink them." The first blast ripped through the asteroids. Rocks shattered into dust, filling the void with fire. The ship shook, alarm screaming again. The human pushed the engines harder, guiding the vessel into a narrow gap between two massive stones. The alien ships followed. The prisoner shut her eyes, whispering a prayer she had not spoken in years. But when she opened them, she saw the human's calm face lit by the glow of explosions. He was not afraid, not even now. And then, suddenly, a voice filled the cabin. Cold. Familiar. "Run all you like, human." The commander's voice boomed through the comms. "But you cannot escape betrayal." The prisoner froze. Betrayal? Her heart pounded as she looked at the human, but he shook his head. The words were not for him. The voice continued. "Your own kind gave you away. Did you think we captured her by chance? No, human. Your people sold her to us. Her breath caught, the words stabbed like knives. She turned slowly toward him. Is it true? His jaw clenched. He did not answer. The commander laughed. Ah, she doesn't know. Tell her, human. Tell her that your leaders bargained her people's freedom for their own safety. Tell her that you are not her savior. You are her curse. The prisoner's chest tightened. The fire of hope that had grown inside her flickered dangerously. Answer me, she demanded. Is it true? The human's eyes stayed fixed on the stars. There are things you are not ready to know. Her fists shook. You let me believe in you, and all this time, your people betrayed mine. Silence stretched heavy in the cabin. The alien ships drew closer, their weapons charging for the final strike. But the human's voice broke the silence. Yes, he said at last, it is true. Some of my people betrayed yours, but not all of us, not me. Her eyes burned with tears, but his words cut deeper still. He turned, his gaze fierce and unbroken. I came here because I will not let betrayal be the last word between our kinds. I came because I choose differently. The commander's laughter roared across the comms. And that choice will kill you both. Blasts erupted, streaking past the ship, shaking it violently. The prisoner gripped the edge of her seat, torn between rage and belief, despair and hope. The human slammed his hand on the console. Hold on! He pulled the ship into a sharp dive, plunging deeper into the asteroid field. Stones crashed together, sparks flared, but somehow he guided the ship through the storm. The alien warships followed, but one struck a rock, exploding into fire. Another clipped its wing, spinning out of control. The human's eyes burned with focus. Betrayal can break us, he said, his voice like steel. But it can also light the path to freedom. The prisoner stared at him, her chest rising with heavy breaths. His people may have betrayed her, but this man, this single human, was defying an empire for her sake. For the first time, she understood the truth. He was not her curse. He was her chance. The battle in the asteroid field raged on, but inside the small ship, a new fire began to grow. The ship drifted out of the asteroid field, its hull scarred and burning. Silence returned, broken only by the hum of the engines. The prisoner sat with her hands trembling, her mind heavy with the commander's words. Betrayal. A wound deeper than any chain. Yet the human did not look shaken. His hands were steady on the controls, his eyes sharp, fixed on the horizon of stars. Finally, she whispered, Why do you keep going? You heard him. My people were betrayed. Your people sold us. He did not answer at first. His silence was like a stone pressing down on the cabin. Then he said low and certain, Because betrayal does not end the story. Choice does. Before she could respond, the console lit up with a new warning. A massive signal pulsed on the screen. The human's jaw tightened. They're bringing out their world burner. Her blood ran cold. Every empire in the galaxy knew the stories. Giant machines that could reduce entire planets to fire and ash with a single strike. No army could resist such a weapon. The human pressed buttons rapidly, bringing the image onto the screen. There it was, a colossal ship, black and gleaming, shaped like a spear aimed at the heart of worlds. Its engines glowed red, its cannons, alive with energy. They mean to erase us both, the prisoner said, her voice shaking. The human leaned back, his expression unreadable. No, they mean to erase anyone who resists. He turned sharply toward her. But we have a chance. That weapon can be destroyed. If we take it, we don't just survive, we change everything. Her eyes widened. Destroy it? That's impossible. Nothing is impossible, he said firmly. Not if we choose to act. The ship shook as the giant weapon locked onto them. The warning alarms screamed. In seconds they would be dust. But the human's hands moved with speed and precision, weaving the small craft into a dive that slipped under the weapon's first blast. A streak of white fire tore across the stars where they had been only moments before. The prisoner clutched her seat. Even if we reach it, what then? We cannot fight an empire's greatest weapon alone. The human's voice was calm, almost cold. "We won't fight it. We'll take control of it." Her heart stopped. "That's suicide." "Maybe," he admitted. "But sometimes one choice can burn brighter than 1,000 lives." The ship sped forward, dodging blast after blast. The world burner loomed larger and larger until it filled the view like a black star. Its weapons pulsed, ready to fire. Again. At last, they broke through its outer defenses, slipping into a narrow docking bay beneath its surface. The hangar was dark and empty, but the moment their ship touched down, the alarm screamed again. The human grabbed his weapon, his jaw tight. "This is it," she shook her head. "We will never make it. Even if we reach the control room, there will be hundreds waiting." He looked at her, his gaze unflinching. "Then we don't need to reach the control room. We just need to reach the choice." Confused, she followed him out of the ship. The hangar shook with every step, lights flashing red. Shadows of soldiers moved ahead, their armor glowing. Blaster fire rained down as they ran. The human returned fire with deadly aim, dropping soldier after soldier. But still they came. The prisoner's arms shook as she lifted her stolen blade again. She struck clumsily, but the fire in her chest grew with every swing. She was no longer only surviving. She was fighting. At last, they broke through into a vast chamber, and there it was, the heart of the weapon. A pulsing core brighter than a sun, humming with energy. Wires and conduits stretched from it like veins feeding the fire of destruction. The prisoner stopped, her breath frozen. This could burn entire worlds. The human's eyes locked on the core. Or it could be turned against them. She turned to him in shock. "You mean, fire it at the Empire?" His jaw tightened. One choice, one strike. Millions could live free, or millions could burn. She stared at him, horror and hope fighting in her chest. That much power. No one should decide that alone. But the human stepped forward. His hand hovered over the console, his eyes dark with fire. "I am not deciding for myself," he said. "I'm deciding for every life that still believes in freedom." Behind them, soldiers stormed into the chamber. The commander's roar filled the air. "Do it, human. Prove to her you are nothing but a weapon of chaos." The human's finger hovered over the controls. Sweat dripped from his brow. The prisoner's heart pounded. In this moment, the galaxy held its breath. Would he burn worlds, or save them? The human closed his eyes, and chose. The chamber shook as the human pressed his hand against the console. The core of the world burner flared like a newborn sun. Lights flickered. The air grew hot. Even the soldiers paused, fear flashing in their glowing eyes. The prisoner shielded her face from the blinding light. Her heart raced. Had he just doomed them all? The commander roared from the doorway, his blade raised. "Foolish human, that weapon will consume you first." But the human stood firm. His jaw was tight, his eyes unblinking. "No," he said. "It will consume those who believe themselves untouchable." The core pulsed again. The entire ship shuddered, as if it were alive and afraid. Across the console, alien symbols flashed red. The weapon was charging, not at the prisoner, not at their small craft, but at the Empire's own fleet waiting beyond the stars. The soldiers hesitated. Some stepped back. Even they knew what this meant. One strike could wipe out their entire armada. The commander snarled, "Stop him!" They rushed forward, weapons blazing. The prisoner screamed as blasts tore through the chamber. She lifted her blade, blocking one strike, stumbling under the weight. The human fired back, his shots precise, each one dropping a soldier before they could reach the core. The room trembled harder. The console screamed with warning tones. The weapon was seconds from release. The prisoner shouted over the noise, "If you fire, the Empire will hunt you forever." The human's voice was steel. "Let them." The commander leapt forward, his blade cutting through the air. The human spun, blocking with his stolen weapon, sparks flying. They clashed in the heart of the chamber, fire and shadows around them. "You think one human can change the stars?" the commander growled. The human pushed back, his teeth gritted. Not think, no. The core screamed louder, its light filling the chamber. The prisoner fell to her knees, covering her face. And then the stars trembled. A beam of pure energy burst from the world burner, brighter than anything she had ever seen. It tore through the void, cutting across the darkness like fire through cloth. The Empire's warships outside had no time to move. One by one they exploded into fire, their remains scattered across the galaxy like burning dust. The shockwave shook the chamber. The soldiers screamed as the walls split. The commander froze, his eyes wide with horror. No! Impossible! The human shoved him back, his face lit by the burning glow. This is what happens when one choice defies an empire. The commander swung again, but the ground gave way beneath him. The explosion ripped through the floor. He fell into the fire, his roar fading into silence. The prisoner gasped, staring at the human. He stood before the pulsing core, his chest rising heavy, his eyes still locked on the stars beyond the shattered walls. The world burner was broken, smoke pouring from its veins. Sparks fell like rain, but in the silence after the blast, the galaxy itself felt changed. The prisoner whispered, her voice shaking. You destroyed them. You destroyed their fleet. The human turned to her, his face weary but strong. No, I destroyed their chains. She staggered to her feet, looking around at the wreckage. The Empire's greatest weapon lay crippled. Entire armadas had been turned to ash. For the first time in years, the galaxy might know freedom. Yet she also felt fear. The Empire would not forget. They would not forgive. As if reading her thoughts, the human said quietly, they will come again, stronger. But tonight, they learned that even one human can shatter the stars. The chamber groaned. Fire spread across the walls. The weapon was collapsing. We need to go, she cried. He nodded, pulling her toward the exit. They ran through collapsing corridors, sparks falling like meteors around them. The ship they had stolen waited in the hangar, its engines damaged but alive. They climbed aboard as the floor cracked behind them. The human slammed the controls and the vessel roared to life. Flames consumed the hangar, chasing them as they lifted into the air. The ship blasted through the broken hull, flying into the void just as the world burner imploded in a burst of fire. The explosion painted the stars with light, brighter than any sun. The prisoner stared out the window, her eyes wide with awe. She whispered, the stars. They are trembling. Beside her, the human's hands were steady on the controls. His voice was quiet, almost like a vow. And they will remember why. Silence followed, heavy but alive. The galaxy had changed, empires had fallen, and it was not because of armies or fleets. It was because of one choice, one human choice. The prisoner looked at him, her heart pounding with a new feeling, respect, and something deeper she could not name. He was not just a rescuer. He was not just a fighter. He was something greater. The human turned to her, his eyes meeting hers. This is only the beginning, he said, and far across the galaxy, whispers began to spread. Whispers of a human who had defied an empire. Whispers of a man who had shattered the stars. The void was quiet. The burning wreckage of the world burner drifted across the galaxy like dying embers. Where once an empire's pride had stood, now there was only silence. Inside, the small stolen ship, the prisoner sat in awe, her eyes locked on the stars. They seemed brighter now, freer, as if they too had been released from chains. For the first time since her capture, she felt the weight of fear lift from her chest. Beside her, the human guided the ship through the wreckage. His face was calm, but his eyes carried the shadow of what he had done. He had made a choice that reshaped the galaxy. One man, one human, she whispered, her voice trembling. They will never forget this. They will never forgive you. He did not look at her. His gaze stayed on the stars. Then let them remember, let them fear. For too long they thought no one could stand against them. Tonight they learned otherwise. Her eyes studied him carefully. He was not a god, not a legend carved from stone. He was flesh and blood, scarred and weary. And yet, he had defied an empire. The silence stretched until she finally asked, "Why, me? Out of all the lives in this galaxy, why did you choose mine?" For the first time he turned to her. His gaze was heavy, filled with unspoken truth. "Because you had already braced for death, and I needed to show you that life can still fight." Her breath caught. She wanted to argue, but the words failed her. Deep inside, she knew he had not just freed her body, he had reignited her spirit. But the moment of peace ended quickly. The console screamed with new alerts, enemy signals, dozens of them. The Empire was already regrouping. The prisoner's chest tightened. "We cannot fight them again. We will not survive." The human adjusted the controls, his voice calm. "We don't need to fight them. Not yet. The galaxy has seen what one human can do. That is enough." The ship slipped into the shadows of the wreckage, engines low. Enemy warships passed by, their searchlights sweeping the debris. The human guided them into silence, hiding in the ruins of the weapon he had destroyed. Hours passed like years. At last the enemy fleet pulled away, retreating to lick their wounds. The galaxy was scarred but free for now. The prisoner leaned back, exhaustion pulling at her bones. She whispered, "Where will we go?" The human's eyes burned softly. "Anywhere they believe there is no hope. That is where I belong." She studied him again. He was not seeking glory. He was not chasing power. He carried a burden larger than himself, a weight he never asked for, and yet he bore it without hesitation. "You are not just a man," she said quietly. "You are a spark, and sparks can set stars aflame." He did not smile, but his silence was answer enough. The ship drifted into deep space, away from the Empire's reach. Stars stretched endlessly before them, like paths waiting to be chosen. Whispers began to spread across the galaxy. On broken worlds and in dark corners, voices carried the tale. A human who walked into death and chose life, a man who shattered the stars with his defiance. Some called him savior, others called him destroyer. But all agreed on one truth: he had changed everything. The prisoner looked once more at the human who had saved her. Her heart carried both fear and hope, but above all, belief. Belief that even in the darkest night, a single choice could light the galaxy. And somewhere in the endless stars, the Empire seethed, preparing to rise again. But tonight the galaxy did not belong to them. It belonged to the man who had defied them, the man who shattered the stars.